Hey everyone, how's it going? Something a little bit different today. I will not be showing any books, but I wanted to talk a little bit about Marvel's Fresh Start, which doesn't feel like much of a fresh start at all. I had some financial issues about a year ago, which led me to stop buying comics on a regular basis. So I've only been buying special editions whenever I can. And it was actually a perfect opportunity to drop Marvel Comics because I was not happy with their output for probably 3 or 4 years. Uh, I did not like Jonathan Hickman on the Avengers, even though I liked him on Fantastic Four and especially on Secret Warriors and on Shield, of course. But I did not like him on the Avengers, and the Avengers have always been my favorite Marvel comic. And lately, all the nonsense that Mark Waid's been doing has been just ridiculous. And I'm very upset that someone that has all the for all the years that he has been writing comics, Mark Waid had a very subpar product compared to everything I'm used to seeing from him. Not only Kingdom Come, but I've never read his Flash, but I remember him from Captain America was a great story. I've read Superman stories written by him. So I know that Mark Waid is a lot better than that. Also, he's attempted doing a creator-owned comic, Empire, which I probably should get out of the storage and see where I put it in and show it off because it was a very interesting comic. Now, the 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 relaunch that is the first measure implemented by C.B. Cebulski as editor in chief, and I was not very convinced when it was announced last year that Cebulski was going to be hired back to Marvel to become editor in chief. That it was going to be very effective. I remember Cebulski as a talent scout. He actually came to Portugal once as a talent scout, and there are several uh, Portuguese artists currently working in the American industry, including for Marvel Comics. And so that worked. But he always seemed like a very nice guy, which is probably not what you want from an editor in chief. You need someone who's basically a lot more business and who is not afraid of making the writers and artists upset at him. Uh, if that brings about good results in the end. But what Sapolsky has been doing here, and I'm not saying that it's completely his fault. At this stage, the publishing business looks to be like it has a very reduced budget compared to what was normal for for many years. Not only the 70s, 80s, 90s, even during the Joe Quesada era, or even what Axel Alonso had to work with. But it looks like the publishing division has been running on pennies, and that is how we ended up with a very short talent pool and a bunch of Tumblr rights and deviant artists being promoted to becoming writers and artists at Marvel Comics. It should be only the best of the best, and right now they have either left the industry or they're working at DC or they're doing their own thing at Image Comics. So I'm not sure if CB is going to have all the means that he needs at his disposal to restart Marvel as a publishing brand with with the characters that he needs and with the talent that he needs to bring back those characters. What happened with this fresh start, this relaunch that is not really a relaunch? He just shuffled some names from one title to the other. several of the characters are still unrecognizable. Wolverine is still Old Man Logan, and X-23 is still Wolverine. Captain America seems to be back to normal. Maybe. I mean, we have an avowed racist writing Captain America, so I really don't trust that. And apart from that, I think only Jason Aaron's Avengers might be interesting. Since I like Aaron and I'm an Avengers fan, I should probably give it a try in trade paperbacks. Apart from that, I really don't see much changing. People are fed up with the constant relaunches as well. It looks like, it's not bringing in the sales, and 6 months later, it all goes back it doesn't go back to normal. It's just the madness continues. Another step moving towards the abyss, and just another relaunch. And after a while, they start becoming the norm, and people stop paying attention. That said, I think that maybe Marvel does not need to publish comic books in the United States themselves in order for them to make money. They should probably they probably ought to shut down their publishing division. And if somebody should make comics in the United States, last year I probably thought that IDW would be a good idea to do it, but nowadays with all the GI Joe fiasco and the Hasbro verse not really gaining any sort of steam sales wise, I don't think that IDW can do it. They probably don't have the manpower, and they're the only person in there that actually would make for a good editor. Worked for is doing special projects instead of doing monthly comics. So the other choice might be going for Dark Horse. It would be a good idea to make up to Dark Horse for losing the Star Wars license, and for soon losing the Fox license after the deal goes through for Marvel to buy the Fox properties. The other thing that is that Dark Horse hasn't had any big hit in the last few years, and maybe they'd have to restructure their editorial department in order to be able to publish a large what to them would be a large amount of Marvel comics. Probably not the 50 or 60 that Marvel's putting out now, but at least 20. Just 20 for Marvel, and maybe a few more for Star Wars, because Star Wars would go with Marvel. But apart from that, I'm really not sure that Marvel needs to make money with comics in the United States. There is only one company in the world that needs to make money out of publishing Marvel comic book stories, and that is the Italian company Panini. Panini was once part of the Marvel empire, but after the 1997 bankruptcy, it became independent again. They're mostly known throughout the world as a sticker collection company. But since the Marvel bankruptcy, they had their own. They had the exclusive rights to distribute Marvel comics, and in some countries DC Comics outside North America. And Panini, being the only big company with an incentive for Marvel comic book stories to exist, then it would probably be a good idea for them to create those stories on their own. And they already create comic book stories. They produce the Disney comics that are sold throughout Europe. For example, the best-selling comic in Italy, I've been told, is Topolino, which is Mickey Mouse's name in Italy, and it's a weekly comic, digest size, about 200 pages and costing $4. And it sells about 100,000 copies a week. So putting that into perspective, it would be like in the United States, the top selling comic selling about 500,000. And imagine that 500,000 selling comic with still $4, but with 8 times more pages than it has now. So probably it's not something that's going to happen. I doubt that anyone even considered the idea, especially since Marvel being an American company, and most of the discussion centered around how to restructure Marvel is done from an American perspective. But from an international perspective, we don't actually need Marvel comics to be made in the United States. Disney stories are not made in the United States. They haven't been made in the United States for several years. They're made in Italy and Denmark, France, Brazil, and they're sold all across the world. And while the Disney comics stopped being sold in large amounts in the United States, they're still the best-selling uh, newsstand comics across Europe in a variety of countries. So with that, since the director actually is successful in that regard, uh, I'm pretty sure that Panini would be able to assemble a large group of talented writers and artists who would understand that they would be working on uh, corporate properties, which means that they would understand that they don't own the stories and that there would be need to be a modicum of them being recognizable by their target audience, which means no Riri Williams, no Jane Foster as Thor, and the Falcon is Captain America's best friend and confidant, not Captain America, and Wolverine is an Australian dude with claws that likes to drink beer and not a teenage girl. That said, tell me what you think. Is my idea completely stupid? I'm sure some people will think it is. Is Do you think that maybe it could be done? Maybe you think it should be done. I doubt that very few people would agree with me. Uh, so it's not going to happen. It's just a crazy idea that's been floating in my head for a few months. I've mentioned it here and there, and people usually tell me I'm nuts. Uh, I also don't know, even for the American fans, if the stories were created in Italy, how they would be distributed or even packaged for an American audience, especially because the the Topolino comic in Italy, it has those 200 pages are not one story. There are several different stories of different size. Some are 2 pages, some are they have about 10 pages. The big ones have about 30 pages, and there's a bunch of characters in there. Oh, I have Spike in the chat. How you doing, Spike? I saw that you had gone that you were alive. Hey, yeah, just heard about this. I put the link up there in the Hangout for the Hangout if you want to join. Just just a crazy idea. I think I mentioned it in one of your videos. I think, but it's not something that will probably be able to be implemented. So, I think I was done anyway. Unless you want to join. Yeah. Okay. Just in case, there have been a few Marvel stories that have been produced outside the United States, but they have had limited distribution. I think Marvel published about 10 to 12 years ago a Wolverine comic set in Brazil, and there was a Daredevil and Captain America story. Those were produced in Italy, and they were in European format. I don't know if they sold anything in the United States. I've taken note of them; they were good. So, Spike said he's going to join. I'm waiting for him to come on. I also remembered a few years ago that Marvel put out a collection of Spider-Man manga and X-Men manga. Uh, I remember they didn't sell particularly well. The idea had some merit, but basically it was a continuity just for. Can't choose that link. Oh, man. You're. Hi, Res. How you doing? Let me see. I'm trying to find. What the hell is that? Control room. I'm trying to find share the share link. I'm trying to find the sharing link. I gotta can find it. Can't find the link. Yeah, Rez, I was talking about an idea I had for Marvel Comics to stop publishing their own comics and to license them out to another company. And no, I'm not. I didn't see Black Panther. I haven't been to the movies in 7 years, and I'm not going to go back now. I can't find the link. I'm sorry, Spike. I'm trying to find the link, and I can. Sorry, Spike. I can find the link to put you in the chat. We can go all over this. This seems different. I don't know. The control room seems different, and I don't know what happened here. Yeah, I know that that IDW is doing a Disney Kids line. Um, from what I've been told, they're running a few of the Italian stories, but they're very limited. The Italian publisher, the Italian publisher, they put out about 1,000 pages of new material per month. So I think only about a fraction of that is reaching the United the United States. I'm trying to get the link, get a link to invite people on, but I can't. Yeah, yeah, I've seen some of those Star Wars stories. There's a publisher in Portugal that's been running them in larger books, and well, I've never. They don't interest in my. They don't interest me much. I've never been interested in Star Wars expanded universe. I, I've always preferred the Star Trek expanded universe. I own a variety of novels, and occasionally I've bought some comic books. No, I have the IDW put out a collection with the Marvel Comics material from the about the time of the first movie. Then there was an ongoing series of all new stories that were penciled by Dave Cockrum with and inked by Klaus Jensen. They look pretty good because Cochrum's very good at designing aliens, so they didn't need to be limited by on special effects like they were in the original series. I have one collection from these of DC material. I think the Gorn Crisis. I bought it for like $1 or something. And there was a one shot from Wildstorm. Yeah, the Star Trek comics. Yeah, exactly. It was the Marvel had a license for Star Trek comics in 1979. They published an adaptation of the first movie, and then an 18 issue series. Oh, hey Scott, how you doing? They published an 18 issue series with the that was a continuation of the Star Trek the motion picture. It was I think Martin Pesco wrote some stories, and most of the art was done by Dave Cockrum. It's not the Star Wars series. That lasted for about a year and a half, and I have a collection of that from this stuff. I have the Gorn Crisis, Wildstorm. Once had the license, and they put out a one shot that has the only New Frontier comic book story. New Frontier was a Star Trek series of novels that was created by Peter David, and it's actually pretty fun. He uses characters from the animated series, Morass and the guy with three arms. What was his name? As well as Robin Chapel, who appeared in the Next Generation, and a few characters that he created specifically for that series. They've only appeared in comic book story that once in that one shot that Wildstorm put out. Uh, and I've, I've been buying the IDWs. I bought the IDW series for a few years after the first Star Trek reboot, but they're not very good. They had their moments. The only thing that IDW put out that I actually like was the Assignment Earth series that was written and drawn by John Byrne. That was actually pretty fun. Assignment Earth is a was meant to be a TV series in the late 60s that was supposed to be a spin-off of Star Trek, and it features time traveler Gary Seven. I'm trying to find a link to invite people over for the show, but I can't find it. And it was really silly. Okay, third-party Marvel publisher in the United States right now. Only Dark Horse probably has the experience and the manpower to do it, and it would be a nice way to compensate them for losing the Star Wars license and maybe the Fox license once the deal goes through for Disney to buy them. Uh, Internationally, I think the stories should not the Marvel stories should not be made in the United States anymore, and I think that Panini should do it because they have the Italian studio where they produce the Disney comics, and the Italian writers and artists are very used to working in a corporate environment. Um, their biggest publisher, Sergio Bonelli, who owns the Western character Tex Willer plus Dylan Dog. They have a rotating team of writers and artists that create all of their monthly comics. Uh, they're black and white digest size, so they don't stray too far from the original concept, so they're always recognizable, even when you have new stories and new villains. The main characters are pretty much stay the same every year. If you read a text story from 10 years ago and another from 20 years ago, the character has remained pretty much the same. God says I'd like to see Marvel get Micronauts and Rom back. You and me both, brother. I remember that a few years ago, uh, Tom Brevoort was pestered a lot online about getting the rights to ROM back, or even Marvel buying ROM outright from Hasbro because they weren't doing anything with it. They never they never put out a toy with the character since the 1980s. The Micronauts is a bit more complicated. I think the Japanese company needs to be involved in that. The original designs belong to Takara Toys, and the storyline I think belongs to Hasbro to Hasbro now. There's probably a few other characters that I'd like to see. I'm actually interested in seeing Conan back at Marvel, but I'm afraid that the politically correct brigade is going to ruin the character. He's not supposed to be politically correct at all. He's a barbarian, and why would anyone want to change that? The whole point of Conan the Barbarian was that as a person, he was a much more honorable than any of the civilized people that he encountered along the way. And as far as he understood, civilization was doomed to fail anyway. That was a concept that actually came from Robert E. Howard's head. Howard had a lot of contempt for modern civilization that that transpired not only in his Conan stories, but also in King Cole, and even in Solomon Kane, which was set in the 17th century. But about 90% of Solomon Kane stories uh, are him spending a lot of time in Africa, fighting wizards and demons. And so he doesn't spend a lot of time in Europe. There are only a couple of stories. One of them is in France, I think. The, I saw the Solomon Kane movie years ago. It was kind of okay, but it could have been better. Yeah, yeah, Scott. It would be very good to see Michael Golden back on Micronauts. I don't know how old Golden is nowadays, and I don't remember seeing him doing anything the last 10 years, 15 years. Uh, I think maybe Pat Broderick would be a good choice to get back. Broderick replaced Golden in the Micronauts in the late after Golden left. More fantasy comics. Yeah, yeah. I think there's a lot of fantasy, but I think there's some fantasy out there, but it's being done by people with who don't have much of life experience or the literary knowledge to understand how a fantasy is supposed to be done. A lot of things seem to have sarcastic characters going around and making jokes while they're slaying beasts, and it always looks too too Japanese for me. Like says my friend Mario did the Solomon Kane Dark Horse books. I really wanted to work with him. Yeah, I thought about buying one of those Solomon Kane books. I picked one up from the store, and I think I remember leafing through it, but I ended up not taking it home. That says, yeah, it's neutered. Exactly, yeah. Um, there are two ways to do fantasy that always then if you know how to build up the universe, they always work. You either go for the Tolkien-esque epic, and that means you have to think about the entire world, how it's set up, how all the characters relate to one another, nations, politics, uh, races. You have to think all of that. The other one is the more Conan type sword and sandal, uh, where magic can be either outright there or just implied. Uh, I personally like the Conan touch. Is always going around and killing monsters and fighting evil wizards. But the while it looks very formulaic, I think that if you read all the stories at once, you find the character evolving from point A to point B, even when you read in the original publishing timeline, because the first Howard story is a King Conan story, and it is only after that that he starts going backwards through Conan's chronology, and that's why there are several competing chronologies. People trying to create the life of Conan from his beginning in battling the Vanir until he becomes king of Aquilonia. That's as I remember back in the day reading Slain by Bisley in Heavy Metal and being blown away. I have a Slain novel that I bought, but I've never read. I loaned it to a friend of mine. I think he still has it. I've never read the, the Slain stories. Last thing by Simon Bisley that I bought was what was it called? Geist Hawk that he did with Matt Wagner. at Legendary Comics, and it's a fantasy story, but it's a modern fantasy story, and it's a guy that specializes in hunting down monsters that sort of leave the reservation because they exist, but they can't call too much attention for themselves. Yeah, I'm glad you bought it. I only bought the first series. It's the first 4 issue mini series. I didn't buy the second one, but uh, I think it'd be an interesting read as well. That thing was done by a legendary. I think that Wagner and Beasley were probably trying to do it as a as a movie proposal. Legendary Comics is owned by Scott Mitchell Rosenberg, I think, and Rosenberg is a Hollywood agent who uses comics to serve as proposals. That's how Cowboys and Aliens came about. I've never read Cowboys and Aliens. Actually, no, I did read it, but I didn't buy it. Uh, it was sort of silly. For anyone coming in late, the topic I started with was that Marvel should stop publishing their own comics and they should let somebody else do it because I don't trust that Disney will give CD Cebulski the means to bring the Marvel back to its former glory. And I propose the alternative that an Italian company should produce the comics on an international forum, and then they would probably be shipped back to America. Although I think that Dark Horse could do it. Scott says, I also liked Hunter in heavy metal, fantasy, sci-fi. I don't remember Hunter. Um, was it French or American? There was, I think by the 80s, that heavy metal was mostly focusing on American made material. Like says, I know for a fact Disney doesn't mandate Marvel guidelines. No, but they do mandate Marvel's budget, and they probably think that with so many years of stories that they probably don't need to come up with new properties to mine and to adapt to other formats. I think that their main focus now is seeing what they can turn into a movie or at least a TV series. It says uh, American. Yeah, who did that? Do you know if it's been collected anywhere? Well, the line is an issue, but I, I I don't I don't feel that the 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 whole reason that those people the salon writers and the deviant art screw ups that they're working for Marvel just because they're friends with the editors. Yeah, there's exactly they spread the money to thin publishing 100 plus titles. I agree completely, and that's one of the problems. Uh, by half or even more. I wouldn't if I were editor in chief. I would never publish more than one Spider-Man book and more than one Avengers book, uh, or even brand dilution is a problem that Marvel's had since the 90s. And the more comics you put out, the less each individual title will sell. So for me, 20, between 20 and 30 monthly comics would be would be the ideal for Marvel, for the Marvel universe. That is, there are a few titles that Marvel has that they shouldn't have the Marvel branding. Like when Disney basically took over Big Hero 6. So if anything new from Big Hero 6 comes out, it's not thought of as a Marvel property. I think that something like Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur can exist specifically as a children's title and not be tied to the main Marvel continuity. So the other superheroes should not show up in Moon Girl or or anything like that. If they could get somebody decent to write America Chavez, he should probably move to another Kids Land as well. I don't think that the character needs to be in the Marvel universe to be successful, and it's probably a hindrance because the main Marvel fans we understand that that the Marvel universe as a concept needs to make sense. And if you start introducing silly stuff like the smartest person in the world is a 10-year-old girl and their pet dinosaur, or that the lesbian Latina character actually comes from a parallel dimension that's made of love and everybody's a female, that doesn't mesh well with the concept of the Marvel universe. Like says, if anybody to really wanted to hit the all ages comics, they should be getting David Peterson, who did Mouse Guard. I think that's a wonderful idea. Mouse Guard looked really interesting. I've read the first miniseries, and I've been told to get the second one. And that's amazing. I think that that's the type of thing that a European artist could have thought of. And if that had come out as a European comic, it would probably have sold in the hundred thousands of copies in the whole of Europe. And it's a shame that Mouse Guard never became a big success. When we try to think of successful indie properties since the since the beginning of the millennium, or since the late 90s, probably Bone comes to mind, maybe Strangers in Paradise. I don't think that people remember Mouse Guard that unless we remind them of it. And I don't know what if David Peterson is doing anything nowadays. Is he? I like it better when books really cross over and the X-Men have their corner. Yeah, the 90s had that whole degree of separation when they tried to get five different editors in chief and the characters wouldn't cross over. Um, that said, the what was always normal was for the characters to be in their own corner, and crossovers were rare. If something like Iron Man appeared in Daredevil, it was a once every 5 years event, and that would make it special. And we would see the cover and oh my God, Iron Man is a guest star in Daredevil. I have to buy this. And nowadays, oh, it's Daredevil comic, but Iron Man is on the cover, and Wolverine is on the cover, and America Chavez is on the cover. Everybody except Daredevil is on the cover, and that's pretty much the norm. I think I remember some opinion pieces that somebody was complaining about all these crossovers affecting story quality, and what we had there was the readers kind of messed it up because what they told the retailers and the editors was that I only want to buy this comic if it matters, as in it matters to the continuity, and it's not the the company's job to say this story matters. Every story should matter on its own because of its quality. And if you're thinking that this matters because it's connected with that comic that's that has 20 degrees of separation, that's a silly idea. Because if you try to read that comic on its own, it's not going to work. Of course, there always should be some connection between titles. What we had was uh, we knew that Captain America couldn't appear this month in the Avengers because he was being held prisoner by Flag Smasher in Switzerland or something, and that worked. The same as when Wolverine did not appear on the X-Men for a few months because Chris Claremont was writing the first Wolverine miniseries, and so the X-Men was not supposed. So Wolverine was not supposed to be on the X-Men. Marvel Knights even got better when they became like Elseworlds minis. Yeah, yeah. The the idea behind Marvel Knights that the comics were supposed to be a little bit more adult. They can those Marvel Knights stories they're not they're not set outside the Marvel universe. Uh, they're they are more like the idea that was normal in the 70s and 80s, where was that the comics remain themselves throughout their entire run, and guest appearances were rare. So that's that's kind of what happened in Marvel Knights. It was the same thing that happened in a few titles in on DC in the late 80s, the ones that eventually became the Vertigo titles, uh, like Animal Man and Doom Patrol, and even Mike Grell's Green Arrow, which was for mature readers, and you knew that they were part of the DC universe, but they did not need to interact with anything else in the DC universe. Uh, that's the best way to create a fictional superhero universe is to each character needs to be important individually, and if it makes sense for this in the story for them for the two different characters to clash, that they should do so. Usually, it's better if it's the same if it's the same writer on both titles, or if the titles get to know each other. They translated to alternate universes with Spider-Man, Ryan, Loki. Well, yeah, the I remember I have the Loki's, yeah, the Loki mini series. There's nothing in there that says this is not part of the Marvel universe. It's a fun story, timeless, starring Loki and Thor, and it works well. It works well. Um, Lately, I've been going through the Grand Comics database, and I've been trying to do my connections between the titles in the 1980s, and I noticed that Scorpio Connection comes out around the same time that Shield had already disbanded after the Nick Fury versus Shield miniseries. But in that story with Nick Fury and Wolverine, it's like Shield is working in its normal self. It's the big spy agency. So it was not important that at the time the Shield had been disbanded. It was just Howard Chaykin trying to do, and Archie Goodwin trying to do one story starring Nick Fury and Wolverine, and the Shield is there because it's always supposed to be there. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted Panini to do that, precisely because the Italian writers and artists are used to working within that frame of mind. The characters are this. This is part of the core concept. You do not change that core concept, and everything else is them having to deal with this story in particular. So if you pick up Nick Fury and who is supposed to be the head of Shield, and you say, "Oh, we're tearing down Shield, we're disbanding Shield. Nick Fury is no longer the head of Shield." Well, that means you have no ideas on what to do with the character. It doesn't mean that it's more dramatic. It's not more dramatic. After that, what happens to Nick Fury? Nothing really interesting. Especially because a few months later, I read a few of those stories. Bob Harras was the writer. They created a new Nick Fury title, and the first thing that they set off to do was how to recreate Shield with Nick Fury in charge. That was published in '89 or '90, and I think that's when Baron von Strucker was resurrected as well. Baron von Strucker was one of the first Marvel comics that I've ever read. Although it was later discovered that it was a robot. It was back when David Anthony Kraft was doing some Captain America with Mike Zack. To go with Wisdom, they dropped the ball. They even forgot plot points in the band is Miles' last run. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the editor's fault. The editor, while the writer should make sure that he has a plan to follow from one issue to the next. If there are things that contradict previous story, you need the editor to make sure that he's reading it to tell the writer, stop, you're doing it wrong. What you said the last time was this, and this is going the other way. So you either have to fix it or you have to explain it. You need a strong, like you say, you need a strong editor, which Marvel is lacking. And that's one of the things that CD needs to do, right? CD Sobolski needs to clean house on an editorial level, and he needs to get rid of the milkshake girls and get people. What editors do is an editor's job is boring. It has a lot of boring parts, and you need a lot of focus to make sure you're doing a good job. And I don't see all of these young assistants having the focus to become full-time Marvel editors, especially when their bosses are going through some sort of midlife crisis and trying to be hip or whatever, so that the young kids would like them or something. Right. Yeah. Well, Brevoort right now is the big problem. Uh, Brevoort used to be Marvel's biggest asset about 15 to 20 years ago, and but right now he either does not want to do his job or he feels that the part of editing comics on a daily basis is beneath him, and he should not have been promoted to a VP job, which was what happened after Quesada stopped being editor in chief. Ready to open the Asian markets. I think it's a lot easier for Marvel to create stories that the European market will like than the Asian market, but the European market is always there, and the Asians are not. I don't know who's going to do that, but since he knows the market, he should probably do a good job there. Yeah, that's getting a little personal. Big family issues. I wouldn't know. That's the thing. I am not interested. I'm not interested in the private lives of the of the writers and artists and editors. So if they have big family issues, then they should take care of them. That's their problem. Maybe a few of them they don't have, maybe they don't have kids and now it's too late to have them, and I don't. And I know that Tom Woodward used to post pictures of his wife, but I don't recall him ever talking about kids. As for these new ones, the new editors, they're probably sharing an apartment with five other people because I doubt they're making that much money. Yeah, some of us just want to work, and yeah, and what we also want is to see the other people working. There's been a lot of talk lately with the fact that Christopher Priest does not want to be a black writer, and he's not. The character that he spent most time on throughout his career is actually been Conan the Barbarian, um, which is not black. And I remember uh, I I didn't know that Keith Pollard and Ron Wilson and Billy Graham were black, and I didn't care. And after I found out that they were, okay, yeah, they're black, whatever. Ron Wilson, for me, Ron Wilson was always a great artist with a Kirby-esque vibe that I enjoyed. I have the Super Boxers graphic novel, and so it was always the work that was important when we were following these people in the 80s, when we didn't have internet. They were names on a comic book, and they were an assurance of quality. Okay, yeah, right. So I think I'm probably going to close up in here. I've been online for about an hour, and it's 1:30 a.m. over here. What would I replace Brevoort with? Captain Beer? Maybe. Captain Beer. Scott Dunbier is at IDW, but is doing special projects. And but he was an editor at Wildstorm when they put out the Authority and Planetary, so it was their best creative period. So I think that Scott Dunbier could do it. You know, that I need to go back to coaching some people from DC. I'm not sure if DC has any big editors that need to be. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Okay. So I'm closing the shot. I'm sorry, Spike, that I could bring you on. I've been looking at the Google Hangout, and they seem to have changed some things. So I don't know where they have the link to invite people over. But we'll try to do a chat. I want to start bringing some people on if I have the chance. That way I can do a few more videos instead of just having to reread my old collection and thinking about historic videos to do. So thank you very much for everybody who came on, Spike and Scott and Res Reads. I hope my crazy idea about Marvel Comics being published outside the United States uh, is at least interesting to think about. Next week, I'll be going to not a convention, a comic salon in Central Portugal, and R.M. Guerra who worked with Jason Aaron on The Goddamned and Scalped is the guest of honor. He lives in Barcelona, so it's easy to bring him in. And I'm going to try to score an interview with him. So hopefully that'll be something something nice and different for the channel. Thank you very much for coming, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.